Hello, welcome back to this video. And today I'm going to talk about the Dunning-Kruger effect. And I decided to title this the Dunning-Kruger effect, why sometimes we think we're better than we are. And as I always do, I start with a point of reference. And sometimes that starting point is going to be a definition. Sometimes it's going to be looking at things from the lens of anthropology, or sometimes it's going to be looking at a psychological theory. And today, embarrassingly enough, I'm going to talk about a cartoon. So that's going to be my starting point. So there's a cartoon named Dash Cafe. It was very popular in the 80s, depending on the country. In Japan, originally, this was in the beginning of the 80s, but it reached Europe a little bit later, mid 80s, late 80s, and even the beginning of the 90s, although we name these differently in different countries. But the title original was Dash Cafe. And the show follows a high school with stunted growth who wants to not only become a basketball player, but he also wants to become the captain of the team. So in one of the episodes known as Cape's Impossible Cheating, the entire basketball team has done very poorly academically, and they are forbidden from playing unless that they can pass the minimum requirements to continue to play. So they're obviously demoralized. They're very, very sad. They don't think that they can do it because they feel that they actually have worked hard. And until Dash Cafe has an idea, it's like, well, we have tried this. So why don't we, instead of just trying to study more, why don't we try something different like hypnosis? And then he convinced everyone to be hypnotized. And he himself participated. He actually does some of the hypnosis himself. And then he keeps saying, okay, the most important part is that you repeat these mantras, these positive affirmation. You're going to do great. You're going to be fantastic. You're going to score perfectly. So you can see throughout all the episode how they're repeating that over and over again in their heads in different locations with different activities, to the point that there's like even a montage, like a classic 80s montage in which you can see and hear the music while they were just saying, I'm studying, I'm very focused, I'm going to do great, I'm going to A this. Anyway, so even when they're actually taking the test, they're repeating those mantras. And then the teacher's even impressed. It's like, what did you do? That's amazing. Like, these kids have never been so confident. So she's so happy, except that the next scene is her correcting and being very, very angry because they have scored the worst that they have done so far. So believe it or not, this is what I think. This is the first thing that I think of when I hear of the Dunning-Kruger effect. Now, obviously, the perception of reality was based on how they felt and that they were going to perform rather than the reality of what they were doing. So confidence is a matter of perception, and actually put here that the way that we perceive the world will shape our sense of reality, and our reality shape the world that perceive the world. So if you remember, I kind of hint that idea in another video in which I was discussing about the heuristics on reality and how there's an influence on one on the other one. So the way that we perceive reality has a lot to do with the experiences that we have had in the past and how we interpret them. And then that is also shaping our future. So it's pretty much the same idea. Now, one thing that I wanted to highlight here is that it is important for our sense of security to feel or perceive that we're doing okay. This has to do with everything that I've discussed so far. Remember, that idea of knowing our surroundings was key, and not understanding our surroundings meant death. So that's why our idea of understanding our reality was so important, that the perception of not doing it okay, not understanding our surroundings, equal most of the times to death. So that's what trigger a lot of our anxieties, at least in the beginning, because we needed, again, to find shelter, to understand what are the safest places. So if we didn't understand that, we were pretty much dead. Now, the important part here is not that we actually have a system that can actually regulate that perfectly. It's our sense of security that's going to kick that in. So basically, if I'm not feeling safe, if I'm not feeling like I understand my surroundings, I'm going to feel scared because, again, that's the mechanism. The mechanism is not based in reality, it's based on perception. So again, it is important for our sense of security to feel and perceive that we are doing okay, because not perceiving or perceiving that we're not doing okay meant more often than not meant death. Although, again, I put here that this is based on perception and not reality. So perception is the key, not reality itself. Now, if we flip that idea, it is important for us to not feeling embarrassed. Why? Because again, feeling embarrassed more often than not meant that we not only didn't understand that, it's that now we lost the trust of the people. That's why we are embarrassed, because not knowing can actually show other people that we don't know our surroundings, right? That's how our old brain used to think. Like, not understanding and showing other people that we don't understand our surroundings will make them feel insecure. It will make them feel unsafe. So that's why a lot of our early behaviors were not only to protect our behavior for ourselves, but also to protect our beliefs and to show other people that we knew and understand our surroundings, so they also felt safe and secure. Now, from an anthropological point of view, again, being embarrassed equal to being ostracized. And if you remember, I actually named what ostracism used to be. It's a form of punishment that the ancient Greeks used to do. Basically, the popular, the people would actually choose sometimes as a punishment, as a form of punishment, to banish certain people or families outside of the cities. So imagine how important it is that was one of the harshest type of punishment that you could perceive, because it meant literally just be outside, be by yourself, survive if you can. So that also means that they lost the support of the people. That's what I was trying to say a couple of minutes ago, that it's not only about me not knowing our surroundings and then being scared of being killed by an animal or eating the wrong things. It's also losing the support of the people who are around me, because now I'm kind of hinting that I don't know what I'm doing, that I cannot be trusted. So being ostracized again used to mean being lost or decrease in quality of life. That's why people try to avoid that as much as they could. Ostracism, as I said, was a type of punishment. Now, I hint that idea of embarrassment, but it is important for us to, again, as I was saying before, to avoid that feeling of embarrassment, because that's synonym of us being lost, of not understanding, of other people already knowing that we don't understand how things work. So again, embarrassment has nothing to do necessarily with us. It has to do with our perception of how other perceives us. So now, in a Pacific Standard article written by David Dunning, the professor behind the Dunning-Kruger Effect, the professor mentions a video from Jimmy Kimmel's show, and this has been repeated over and over again. What I'm about to say, it's not the only time that they have done this, the Jimmy Kimmel show. So again, a member of Jimmy Kimmel's team is sent to outside of the South by Southwest festival and asks people to talk about what they think about some bands. So the important thing is that all of the bands that they're going to name are totally made up. Like, they don't exist, and they go from like minor things that could actually be considered like, all right, so this is a normal name for a band, to totally outrageous. Like, there's one that is Contact Dermatitis, that they come to continue to say, what do you think about Contact Dermatitis? Do you think that this is their best album so far? What do you think how they're going to play? So despite everything being made up, despite like obviously not existing and not knowing anything, that doesn't stop people from giving their opinions about those bands and what they feel about their music. They even ask, like, well, what's your favorite song? I said, well, there's so many, I cannot even name one. Like, they start making things up just to cover for the fact that they had lied, because they didn't want to feel embarrassed. They didn't want to feel like, I'm in front of a camera and I don't even know who, and I'm at a festival and I don't even know who these people are. I should, so I'm going to say, yeah, I like them. But when I'm questioned about the music, instead of just recognizing, you know what, I'm sorry, I misunderstood. I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know that band. They actually came up with an answer, and they're convinced that the music is fantastic, and they're willing to say that they have heard all their albums. Again, they respond this way out of fear of being embarrassed. Now, what is the basis for all of this? What is the basis for this idea of embarrassment? What is that idea? Well, unfortunately, insecurity is at the basis of this not only these biases, but the sense of embarrassment, itself. Now, I want to go back to that idea of the importance of feeling safe. So again, there's nothing worse than us feeling unsafe, that not knowing what's going to happen, that we can be killed, at any point. So that's why a lot of the early development was designed precisely to that. It was designed, a lot of our early behaviors were designed for us to identify potential threats, how to feel safe. And again, it has nothing to do with reality. It has to do with our perception. So we trust our perception more than we trust reality, because the perception that we have is the filter that we use to understand reality. So if obviously our filter is faulty, then we still want to make a lot of mistakes, but it doesn't matter, because what we trust is our perception, not the reality itself. Now, it is important, again, to feel safe. And as a consequence of that importance of feeling safe, we try to avoid feeling lost. Now, from an anthropological point of view, again, feeling lost used to mean death or detrimental loss of quality of life, which is something that I have discussed ad nauseum at this point. And then as a coping mechanism, we tend to consume ideas to confirm our points of view, and we tend to be surrounded by people that reinforce our sense of security. And if this sounds familiar, of course, this is confirmation bias 101. So again, we feel lost, and what do? Well, we need to go back to that sense of security. So what do? Then we try to find things or people that can attest for what we believe, or can actually make us feel that what we're saying or what we're believing or what we're feeling is correct. So we feel safe again. We feel, oh, I'm not wrong. I was kind of correct. So obviously that is a form of confirmation bias. And sometimes we even go as far as making things up to maintain that level of safety. Let's say that I'm trying to find things to cope for that sense of loss, and I try to find things that confirm what I believe, but I cannot find any. And for whatever reason, the next thing that I come up with is like, all right, so I'm going to come up with something that sustains that idea rather than trying to rethink my ideas. So that is exactly what these people at Jimmy Kimmel, outside the festival that were interviewed by Jimmy Kimmel Sim was actually trying to do. They were actually trying to go back to that sense of security, maybe because they felt like, oh, I'm embarrassed because I shouldn't know. Now they're asking me about this and I don't even know a song. They're asking me, they're digging. So I need to continue with the lie that I just said, because I cannot just admit that I'm a liar, because obviously that would be even worse. It's like, not only I don't know these people, but I just lied about it. So instead of just confronting that reality, what we do is we actually go further in the lie and we try to come up with answers. So again, this is just because we're trying to maintain that level of safety that I was discussing before. So far, that is actually not necessarily bad. Obviously, lying is not good. And obviously, creating a band and pretending that you actually have listened to it is not great. But as you see, it's actually a common response that actually is a response to something that is natural, that sense of fear, that sense of embarrassment. Now, that is done on purpose, meaning the lying is obviously done on purpose. You know exactly what you're doing. You know that you don't know these people. You know that there's no such a thing as not that there's no such a thing as contact dermatitis. At that point, you think that that band actually exists, but you have no idea that anything about that band. You have no idea about that band. You have never listened to it. You know that, but you're still pretending. So you are doing that on purpose. That is, the person is aware of what he and she is doing. But sometimes we are in instances in which we're unaware of how much is we are exaggerating. Sometimes we're caught up at a point in which we might have a vague idea and we're pretending, but we're unaware. We're not aware of how little we know about something. So we start coming up with different answers because, again, the same mechanism trying to avoid embarrassment. But in this case, we feel that we know because we have a vague idea, and you feel that, or in this case, we feel that that is enough. So you expand on that vague idea that you have. So that is actually two different things. One, again, as I said before, is doing out of embarrassment, but knowing that you don't know anything, that is being aware. And the other one is being unaware. You have a vague idea of something, but then you exaggerate that, and you're not even aware of how much you're exaggerating. Now, the next thing that I'm going to discuss has to do with that second part, meaning when we are unaware of how much we're exaggerating our own skills, or how much we're exaggerating how little we know, and or how unaware we are on how little we know. So that has to do with metacognition, and I decided to title this Metacognition, or the lack of it. So in the same article that I mentioned before, Professor David Dunning talks about his main studies based on what he's calling, or what is known as metacognition. So basically, metacognition is the process or processes for which a human evaluates himself. Basically, the capacity of each person to evaluate the way that they perceive themselves, and the knowledge that they have, and how they can actually evaluate that knowledge. Now, it regulates the knowledge, the reasoning, and learning. Basically is, am I aware on how little I know, and do I have mechanisms to tell me how little I know? How can I know how little I know about something? Now, some people's perception about their capacities are way off, and this actually goes in both extremes. Some people have a very low capacity to understand certain things, and they think that they're doing great. They think that they have great capacity. And sometimes it happens the opposite. Sometimes some people actually think that they're terrible at something, and it turns out like they're probably one of the best people, or at least they're really good at something, but they're not aware of that. They think they only focus on the negative. They only focus on the things that they don't know. So again, this is an imbalanced mechanism. So again, some people tend to exaggerate in a positive manner, thinking that they're better than they are. And some people tend to exaggerate their capacities in the opposite, in the negative. They think that they're worse than they are. This is actually not also a constant. It's not like certain people are going to carry that throughout all their life and throughout every field that they encounter. Some people are really, really good at evaluating themselves at certain tasks and knowing, oh, I'm really bad at this and I'm really okay at this. And some people are really, really bad at calculating for some tasks and calculating really good at other tasks. Meaning, some people are going to say, oh, I'm really good at that, and they're terrible. And some people the same people, are going to say, but I'm really horrible at this other thing. And it turns out that they're pretty good at it. So as you can see, it's not that by default, there's a lack of self-awareness necessarily. There's a lack of self-awareness in certain fields and not others. And there's everything in between. You're going to encounter people with one extreme in which they are really bad at calculating how they are in pretty much all the fields that they have, and that is problematic. And you're going to encounter people who are really bad at certain things, but they're really good at other or evaluating themselves in other fields. Now, some people's, as I said before, perception about a subject may be way off in a superlative way, and the same people may have a low perception of themselves in other subjects. Is this level of confidence, meaning having a person who says, I'm an excellent person at A, B, or C, and they're actually terrible, is that level of confidence good or bad? So I think that is an interesting question, because we tend to see this level of overconfidence as necessarily a bad thing. And it is, in a sense, but not always. So remember that we discussed this in the past, that confidence actually comes with a lot of benefits. Historically, obviously, confident people contribute to other people's confidence as well. So if I see someone around me who's very happy, very positive, very confident about something, that can actually be contagious. So that's not necessarily a bad thing. And we see that sometimes we choose leaders based on that perception of the confidence that they have on their own, because that idea that now there's someone out there that can have it all, that person knows it all, makes me feel better, even if that idea is ridiculous, because no one knows everything about everything. But that idea sometimes makes us feel great. So again, historically confident people contribute to other people's confidence, and sometimes that confidence translates into real results. Meaning, if I'm going to name the case of, for example, Apple. There's a famous story in which Steve Jobs was saying basically one product needed to change, and it needed to change by a certain date. And people who are working on that by months say, like, there's no way we're going to be able to do that. By sticking to his guns and basically insisting on that idea that it needed to be done, and pushing everyone into that direction, they actually managed to do the product on time. Now, I don't know the nuances of that story. I don't know the reality of it. I don't know if there's certain things that when people have told their stories are different, but it is true that sometimes overly confident people can actually make other people work harder in certain instances, because there's enough people who believe the person and believe the process. Now, that I'm not saying that is necessarily a good thing either. Even if you have achieved that level of success, even if you have made those people work hard in achieving those things, maybe you have done it at a cost that is actually not even worth it. What if those same people lost certain things, got extremely sick because of that, lost their passion about working there and stopped working? Obviously, those are negative consequences. So I'm not going to defend that idea either. I'm just saying that sometimes happens, that level of confidence not only is contagious, but also might actually influences in how people perceive certain things and how they perform certain tasks. So it is important to recognize that, again, that is real, that sometimes confidence can actually drive certain things home, and it can actually make things much, much easier and better. The problem is when people have to actually face real problems and are overconfident about their decisions, especially when they have no knowledge on the subject. If you're just saying, I know that this can be done, but you have no idea how the process works, and you have no idea all the nuances about making that, obviously you're being overly confident about the possibilities, not only your own possibilities as a leader, you're overly confident about the possibilities of others who will influence on the process as well. So obviously that has tremendous negative consequences. Now, but again, since this is a section in defense of confidence and how confidence has some benefits, confidence is so powerful that people are capable of giving away part of their well-being to those with those confident people. Now, I know that sounded kind of like in between. It could be good and bad, and it's true, because it's a statement that actually can be good. Because if you are a good leader and then you, for example, convince people to give something for a good cause, like a charity, for example, good. But in the case, for example, of Bernie Madoff, who conned so many people because they believe in his capacity to manage the money, to actually not only manage, but to make more money for the same people, then obviously that is a bad consequence. It doesn't always have to be that extreme, but extreme of losing that money. But as you can see, that can actually backfire people, not only the leader itself, the overly confident person, but the people who follow that overly confident person. Now, as I said before, this not always has to be that extreme, meaning extreme to the extreme of overly confident people. It doesn't have to go into life and death or a very substantial loss of money. Sometimes we actually fall for that. Now, I actually titled this Overly Confident and Overestimating. Now, I don't know if probably you have had the same outcomes that I've had, but in the past, how many times have a weekend project turned into a month-long nightmare? Or how many times have you estimated that a particular task for a client will only take you like a week or a couple of more days, and you're on your 5th month and you're still arguing with the same client because you haven't actually agreed in certain things, things have gotten wrong in both sides. So that actually has to do with overestimation. That's why I decided to title this Overly Confident and Overestimating. Now, our incapacity to recognize possible problems is accompanied by the lack of understanding your true capacities or the ones your environment puts on you. Meaning it's not only that you don't understand necessarily your own capacities, that actually has to do with your own self-regulation, which is great. But that idea of being overly confident also has to be with the awareness on how other things can affect your outcome, how other things, like for example, people around you being sick and having to take care of that of them, other people who are involved in the same project as you are, since you are just one piece of the puzzle, how are the other pieces going to behave? Do you know very well the other pieces? Do you know the other very well how other people work, how they can deliver? All of those actually have to do more with the outcome than just your piece. Your piece is just whatever you can deliver. And for example, in a world right now in which we are part of teams, right? Like if you are designing anything, you might be a designer, a graphic designer, but there might be someone editing a video. There might be someone else in charge of the marketing and the language. So if all of you are not working in sync, obviously it doesn't matter how great you are. The result is going to be the same, a faulty product or a delayed product. And then sometimes you're going to feel frustrated. Now, if you're overly confident and you are in charge, let's say that you are the person responsible for a project, and then you said, don't worry, I will have this done by next Tuesday. But you haven't spoken yet to the video editor. You have no idea how the marketing person works. Obviously, you're being overly confident and you're overestimating about something that you have no idea. You have no idea about the outcome. But again, this has nothing to do with your self-regulation or how confident you are on your own capacities, but how confident you are on the process itself. That includes things that are not even depending on you. So again, our incapacity to recognize possible problems is accompanied by the lack of understanding your true capacities or the ones your environment puts on you. That's what I was discussing right now. So this is not only exclusively about your capacity to take a look at your own skills and evaluate an outcome, but your capacity to look at your environment and see ways in which that will affect the outcome. Now, sometimes people think, well, that idea of being confident or being cocky about certain things or overestimating is something that happens more often in overly confident people. And it is true, but unfortunately, the Dunning-Kruger effect not only is common on people who are overly confident, is also something that appears even in people with low confidence. So again, it's not only common in confident people, it's also common or appears in low confident people. So this can affect both, as I said, obviously the case about how overly confident people can fall for that, the Dunning-Kruger effect is very clear. So basically, by overestimating certain things, they're trying to get themselves into tasks that are very difficult without knowing or understanding how all the things are going to play out. So that is an extreme that we know. But what happens when you are low confident? Well, sometimes by trying to compensate that low confidence because you don't feel well, you actually feel unsafe. You don't like the way that you feel when you are low confident. We might react by trying to not be embarrassed one more time or look back in front of others, because that also affects their mood, meaning affects your mood and affect the outcomes. So in this case, low confident people will tend to occasionally compensate by trying to make or take on more tasks that they're capable of, or difficult tasks or impossible tasks, and even convince themselves that they can actually do it, at least in the beginning. So all of that is because they are trying again to compensate for a lack of confidence, for how they are feeling about it and how they're not only feeling themselves, but how other people are starting to perceive themselves. So they might think, all right, I know that I might not be able to do this, but I have to pump myself up and I have to be able to make it because now other people are depending on me, or I don't want to disappoint this person, or I don't like how I feel when that person is talking to me because she's talking as if I am less capable than her, for example. So in that case, we tried again to overcompensate by trying to do the opposite. This appears again in both overly confident and low confident people. Now, possible solutions for that. So in one of the research, Professor Dunning and Kruger took people from the groups I'm going to actually talk about the research. So basically they did a research in which they have to evaluate their capacities on certain skills. They have to grade themselves on how they did in certain tasks. And curiously enough, people who have point themselves as the highest score had done actually the worst of all, right? So they actually took some of these people and they repeat the same research over and over again. And they, from those different researchers, they gathered those people who have this scored themselves super high, but they in fact had done really, really low. And they divided those subgroups into two subgroups. One is a group in which they now are going to be teaching them logic, math, and how to evaluate themselves objectively. And the other group in which they are not going to do anything at all. So again, we have a subgroup that now is going to learn basic logic, some math, and how to evaluate themselves objectively. And the second group had nothing. And what they encountered is like later on when they repeated the same type of research, they realized that only the group who had received that training had done much, much better. The other group remained the same. So this is actually very hopeful and positive because it kind of tells you that there's a possibility, there's a way out of that idea, that is not something necessarily that you're born with, and then there's nothing you can do about. So basically, by training, by receiving knowledge, or by understanding how logic works and how evaluate yourself, by training those skills, you can actually become better. Now, what happens or what to do when it's just you? Unfortunately, in those cases, or those people who are they are way off on the way that they're evaluating themselves, having a coach, having a professor, having a teacher, someone who can supervise and look at that and saying objectively, this is not great because A, B, and C, and teaching them exactly how the process work and how they can evaluate themselves is the best way. So if you're just by yourself, it's going to be a little bit tougher. Now, there's still ways in which you can improve on your own. And one way of doing that is by always questioning yourself why you think the way that you do. Like, why do you think that you did okay? What are the points objectively that you think that make you think that you did great? And by doing that, you're forced now to come up with an answer. The answer is going to be either objective or not. If you're not objective, you should actually detect if you're being objective or not. But even if you don't, there are other questions that you have. You can actually ask yourself, is it truly the same way? Is it truly the same way that you did this task, the same way that you have done in the past? Have you done similar tasks in the past? How did you do those tasks? Were you praised by the people? Were those people knowledgeable about the things that they were praising you about? Do they understand how those things work? By asking those questions, by asking yourself, are you, relying on that information that you have from the past in which you did a similar task to evaluate the present moment and the present way in which you did the present task? And if that's the case, what made you believe that you did great? Was it done objectively or corrected by someone else who was an expert on that, or were just corrected by someone who had a vague idea, in which case that you can doubt on that person's capacity to evaluate, and therefore it can also affect the way in which you perceive now how you did the present task, because all the confidence that you have on this task is based on how you did it then, and there's no one objectively capacitated to give you good feedback. So again, all the things that you can do sometimes is when you are about to embark yourself in a task, before you even start the task, have you done the task, a similar task in the past? How did you do it? Did you have the same conditions? Did you have the same support? Did you have the same tools? Did you know people around you who could actually give you feedback? Were you in the same health, with the same health at that moment, or were you feeling a little bit better than you are right now? So all of those are things that you can ask yourself to kind of start evaluating if you can actually perform at the same rate, or if you're probably not going to even know how you're going to perform. And sometimes it is okay, and that is a common thing that I want to highlight here. It is okay if after those questions you say, I don't know, because that is actually a healthy response. If you don't know, you at least have a correct answer. You have no idea. And then you can start evaluating, or you can start looking at things that can actually help you evaluate better how a certain task is going to be done, either now or in the future. But if you already have passed that and you haven't even stopped and you think, yeah, I'm going to do okay, but you haven't passed through that phase of not knowing, then something is probably off. Something is either not being corrected properly, or you might actually be overestimating your capacities in the future. Now, possible solutions if you are a person responsible for someone being overly confident. What if you are that person who now has to evaluate someone else? And what if you are not necessarily an expert? I'm talking about like you're the partner of someone who is overly confident, or you are the father of someone who is overly confident. So this is a tough one, because unfortunately now, if you're not perceived as an expert, the person is going to fight between what they believe and what you believe, right? So obviously, it's basically like saying, why would I give up my beliefs that makes me feel safe in order to follow your belief? Like, why? You're not even an expert. So the person might actually fight that, right? So you actually have to balance reality with criticism. So even if you're better, even if you already have done similar things in the past, and I'm talking about, let's say that someone wants to do a renovation at a house, right? And there's a father and a son, and this is going to be the first renovation for the son. There's going to be like the third or the fourth time that a father has an experience with a renovation. Obviously, the father might not be an expert on this. He might just have a 3 or 4 times experience, but that experience nonetheless might actually be a little bit better than having no experience whatsoever. And the person might actually try to convince the son of, well, maybe there are certain things that you don't know. Maybe you're lacking on this and these, and might actually start asking certain questions that might make the other person uncomfortable about that. So obviously, for that, you have to balance reality with criticism, because again, what you don't want is to produce a rejection on the other part. Meaning, if the other person is just listening to you, just hearing negative thought, or interpreting that there's negative coming in his or her way, obviously the person is not going to react properly, and the person is going to try to defend his or her own ideas. Now, again, that depends on the person and the culture. Meaning, maybe the person is so confident, like real confidence on himself, that said, all right, I don't care much about hearing your opinions because maybe you're right. But if the person is a little bit low confident in certain aspects, the person might say, I don't want to feel less confident than I feel. So whatever I hear from you, I hear as a criticism. I don't like it. I'm not going to listen to you. So again, that depends on the person and the culture. But the common thing that I think, should ask in those questions is, you should actually ask the person for real data. Like, all right, so you're saying that you're going to use a screw here instead of a hammer. Why are you thinking that? What is the thing? What makes you think that is a good idea? But if we're not talking about renovations, let's talk about, like, for example, a company, and then you embark in a project with someone else who doesn't have any experience, and that person is actually going all over the place. A good question to ask is like, all right, so why are you making those decisions? Why? Can you explain to me the thought process so I can understand better? Always try to do it without being aggressive about it. Just asking, because I actually need to know. I want to know also to understand a little bit your process. So if you understand that the person is actually not giving you real information or real data, then you can actually question, all right, so have you ever done this in the past? Have you based this on a data that you have seen on someone? And that is always going to trigger an immediate response. That doesn't mean that the response that you're going to get is truthful. As you saw with the Jimmy Kimmel effect, people are willing to lie once they have embarked themselves into one way of thinking. So don't expect that it's going to be 100% truthful and it's going to be okay. Sometimes people will make, I heard a friend of mine doing the same thing and it was okay. That is a common response. So again, asking the question would be a good idea, but also don't expect that is going to be perfect, because sometimes that question of, can you back that up by real data? Have you experienced that in the past? Is not exempt from lying. So all the questions that you can ask is like, all right, so I know that you're telling me that a friend of yours has done the same thing. We're the same conditions. We're the same conditions that we have, the same computers, the same type of people. Were they doing that because they have all the conditions? Did they have more people? Did they have experts in A, B, and C that we don't have? So as you can see, all those questions are trying to bring information up. And at some point, the person would either have to recognize, well, we don't have the same conditions that my friend had, or we don't have the same process that they have, which is, again, a healthy way to bring into our, well, maybe I don't know as much as I thought I did. Maybe I don't know a lot about certain things. And maybe those are things that I have to rethink. And again, that is a healthy understanding of the process. And always end up with the same questions of, did they have the same support? Meaning, were these people, again, helped by experts? Did they have all the materials that we don't have? All of that, again, can bring that idea of, oh, I was confident about that answer that I gave you, but right now that you're asking me those questions, it turns out that I don't know the answers to those, which make me think that maybe this is a little bit more complicated than I thought. So again, as I always say, don't use this as a way for you to battle with people. This is a tool for self-reflection. So in this case, yes, accepting on the case that I was just describing about, if you are in charge of a project and then you have to evaluate other people, and obviously you have to bring those questions. With the exception of that, you should actually focus on those questions directed to yourself, so you can evaluate yourself more than evaluate other people. However, obviously you can use the same questions or similar questions to evaluate other people, to help them bring those ideas up, bring that idea of, maybe I don't know, maybe I haven't thought through that well, maybe I thought that I thought everything through, but I'm not realizing that I'm not clear about certain subjects. And again, that is a healthy thing, but always try to do that in a healthy manner, not accusing people, not being very forceful with that, but trying to help them understand the process as well. So as usual, I hope that this is useful. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I see you in the next one. Thank you so much.